After getting on the plane, I found that the seat was forcibly occupied by a pregnant woman. She not only refused to get up and give up her seat, but also slandered me for bullying the pregnant woman. At this time I showed the boarding pass in my hand and told her that this was my seat. But she glanced at my boarding pass, and had no intention of getting up at all, but reached out and gently stroked her belly, and spoke slowly. I know, but I am so pregnant, and the window position is comfortable. Can't you give a seat to a pregnant woman? Before I could respond, the man sitting next to her in seat 15B spoke first. He was the husband of a pregnant woman. Since I came over, he has been playing with his mobile phone with his legs crossed. At this time he was too lazy to raise his head, and he sighed impatiently. Isn't it just a seat? What is it pretentious? My wife is pregnant. Can she deliberately lie to you? Hurry up and find a seat to sit down. Don't block the aisle and delay the passage of others. His tone was worse than his wife's. It was like reprimanding an ignorant child, and the eyes of everyone around him were all focused on me at once. Some sympathetic, some watching the excitement, and some looking at me with disapproving eyes. I looked at the couple in front of me coldly. The woman used pregnancy as an excuse to engage in moral kidnapping, and the man pressured me in an impatient tone. In the past, I might have compromised and given in order to save trouble, but today I don't. In the past half-month of business negotiations, I have faced opponents who are 100 times more difficult than them, and my patience and energy have long been exhausted, and I want to rest quietly for a while. I don't want to wrong myself anymore, and I don't give in even half a step. I didn't argue with them. I didn't call the flight attendant to mediate, and I didn't even bother to say a superfluous word. And in the surprised and contemptuous eyes of the couple and the surrounding passengers, I turned around and walked towards the front of the cabin without saying a word. The man's low sneer came from behind him, and he muttered, "Look, isn't this sensible to walk away? And it is a waste of time to have to say a few more words." The pregnant woman also snorted proudly, adjusted to a more comfortable position and leaned against the window. In their eyes, I was at fault and fled, acquiescing to their victory in occupying the seat. But I didn't bother to look back at all, so I walked straight to the flight attendant, smiled and asked, "Hello. Is there still a first-class seat available on this flight?" The young flight attendant was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting me to ask such a question, quickly checked the tablet in his hand, and quickly replied to me, "Some Ms. Show. There is still the last empty seat left." I immediately took out my phone, opened the payment page and asked, "How much does it cost to upgrade?" The flight attendant replied, $1,800. I said directly without hesitation, "Okay." I upgraded and paid on the spot, and the phone immediately popped up a prompt for successful payment, and the whole process took less than a minute. The flight attendant immediately showed a professional and particularly enthusiastic smile on his face, and quickly said, "Okay Ms. Show, I will handle it for you immediately. Please come with me." I picked up the boarding suitcase and followed her through the curtain separating economy class and first class, and the couple and a group of passengers behind me looked at me with complicated eyes. Maybe they still laughed at me in their hearts for being too stupid, spending 1,800 yuan just to gamble with people, but they didn't know it all. I never made a loss-making transaction. I spent this 1,800 yuan willingly, and even felt that it was worth it. The flight attendant thoughtfully took my boarding suitcase and put it properly, leading me to the seat. The soft leather seats were almost completely flat. The display in front of me was larger, and there were a lot more entertainment. As soon as I sat down, another flight attendant handed me a warm towel and a glass of welcome champagne, and politely said, "Hello Ms. Show. I am the flight attendant of this flight, and I will serve you for the entire journey." I took the champagne and thanked him with a smile, and through a curtain. The hustle and wrong of economy class seemed to be a completely strange world. I watched the ground staff do the final inspection before takeoff through the porthole, and my heart was particularly calm, even with a hint of secret expectation. I took out my mobile phone, and before turning it off, I sent a message to my personal doctor. Sisterly, I have already boarded the plane, and the person you mentioned should be on this flight." After sending the message, I turned off my phone and leaned on the seat to close my eyes and recuperate. The takeoff process of the plane was very smooth, and after entering the level flight state, the flight attendant walked up to me again and asked softly, "Ms. Show, do you need to eat now? We have 2 meals to choose from: Australian sirloin steak and French gratin lobster." I replied lightly, "Let's have a steak, medium rare, thank you." The flight attendant then asked, "Do you need to pair it with alcohol? We have Lafite in 82. I nodded in response. "Okay." Soon, the exquisite meal was served, with a white tablecloth with a shiny silver knife and fork, and a goblet filled with mellow red wine. I cut a small piece of steak and put it in my mouth. The meat was tender and juicy. I ate the steak slowly, tasted the red wine, and occasionally swept the curtain separating the economy class. And I silently counted the time in my heart. About 10 minutes have passed since the plane took off, and it is almost time to start. I put down my knife and fork, picked up the wine glass and shook it gently, and the scarlet wine drew beautiful traces along the wall of the glass, like a well-choreographed show, officially kicking off. Another 3 minutes passed, and sure enough, a suppressed but penetrating cry vaguely came from the economy class. The cry was mournful, with a strong sense of panic, followed by a noisy commotion, some shouting, Some screaming in panic. The smile on the flight attendant's face instantly froze, and he immediately winked at his colleagues. And a flight attendant immediately got up and walked quickly to economy class. The moment the curtain was lifted, the chaotic scene of economy class was clearly visible. The center of the riot happened to be the position of the 15th row. Many passengers stood up and gathered around to watch the fun. The anxious voice of the flight attendant was mixed with the crying, and kept comforting everyone. Please stay calm. Please go back to your seat and don't panic. Ma'am, don't get excited. Stabilize your emotions. The flight attendant's face also sank. He picked up the walkie-talkie and said a few words in a low voice. And then the airplane radio sounded a notice to find medical staff. Dear passengers, please note that there is a pregnant woman in a sudden emergency on this flight. If there are medical staff, please contact the flight attendant immediately. The broadcast was broadcast 3 times in a row, and several first-class passengers also looked curiously into the economy class. But I was still sitting in my seat, slowly drinking the red wine in the glass, all of which I had expected. The riot lasted about 5 minutes, and a flight attendant hurried out of economy class, straight to the cockpit, and a few seconds later hurried back. Sweat on his forehead. The flight attendant's expression also changed from serious to particularly solemn, and he picked up the walkie-talkie again. It seemed that he was communicating with the captain, and I could vaguely hear words such as return and alternate landing. And it could be seen that the situation of pregnant women was more difficult than imagined. Not long after, the young flight attendant who had just helped me with the upgrade ran to me in a panic, sweating profusely, breathing rapidly, with helplessness and pleading in his eyes, and hesitated to speak. Show, Ms. Show. I looked at her leisurely, wiped the corners of my mouth with a napkin, and said calmly, is there anything wrong? My tone was calm, incompatible with the panicked and tense atmosphere around me. She took a deep breath, as if she had made up her mind, and quickly said, Ms. Show, I'm sorry to disturb you. There is a pregnant woman in economy class, the one who grabbed a seat with you before. She suddenly bleated profusely. The situation is particularly critical. There is no obstetrician and gynecologist on the plane. We have contacted ground rescue, but the nearest alternate airport, at least 40 minutes to arrive. She is in a very dangerous condition now. She can't wait that long. I listened quietly, without saying a word. The flight attendant's eyes became more and more eager, and there was even crying in his voice. And then he said, the flight attendant just checked your passenger information and knew that you are a doctor at Ruehwa Hospital. So I would like to beg you to go back and help take a look. She looked at me carefully, for fear that I would refuse directly. The other passengers in the first class also looked over curiously, their faces full of surprise and admiration. But they didn't expect that I was still a doctor at such a young age. I put down the napkin, leaned back on the seat, picked up the water next to me and took a sip, then raised my eyes, shook my head gently to meet the expectant gaze of the flight attendant, and spat out 3 words clearly and simply. Why? The expression on the flight attendant's face froze instantly, and he didn't expect me to refuse so simply and indifferently, and called me again in disbelief. Show, Ms. Show, this is a matter of human life. My eyes did not waver at all, and I spoke calmly. I know this is a matter of human life, but first, I am not a doctor specializing in obstetrics and gynecology. Second, I am now on leave and have no obligation to practice additional medicine to save people. Third, and most importantly, why should I save a person who just commanded me and forcibly occupied my seat? My voice was not loud, but every word was clearly transmitted to the ears of the flight attendants and the surrounding passengers. And the expressions on everyone's faces slowly changed from surprise to astonishment and puzzlement. The flight attendant was so anxious that he was about to cry, and quickly retorted, but you are a doctor. Isn't it the duty of a doctor to save lives and heal the wounded? She also wanted to use her professional ethics to morally kidnap me, just like the pregnant woman who kidnapped me with pregnancy morality more than 10 minutes ago. But unfortunately, this set was useless to me at all. I chuckled and asked, Heaven. My vocation is to use professional medical skills to treat patients who abide by the rules and know how to respect medical staff at my job, rather than running to help an unreasonable and domineering person during my private vacation, and taking all kinds of unknown huge risks. There is no professional medical equipment on the plane, no sterile treatment environment, and even suitable symptomatic drugs are not available. But once the treatment fails and there is an ending of 1 corpse and 2 lives, will all the responsibility be put on my head? At that time, will her family take me to court with their backhands, accusing me of practicing medicine without a license and killing people? Will the airline put all the fault on me, the doctor who is kind to help, in order to clear up its own relationship? I asked a series of rhetorical questions, leaving the young flight attendant speechless, opened her mouth, and couldn't say a word for a long time, because she also knew in her heart that what I said was a very likely reality, and medical troubles were never uncommon. At this time, the flight attendant also walked over quickly. Her face was also ugly, but she was much calmer than the young flight attendant. She lowered her posture and said sincerely, Ms. Show, I understand your concerns and thoughts very well, but now the situation is too urgent. The pregnant woman has already shown signs of shock, and if she does not stop the bleeding and stabilize the situation, she will not be able to support the plane landing. Rest assured, Our airline can issue a disclaimer on the spot and all passengers on board can testify to you as long as you are willing to help. She tried her best to give me enough protection to dispel my concerns, but I still shook my head and replied lightly. Verbal promises have no practical meaning at all. Even if the agreement is signed in black and white, if something really happens, it can still become a piece of waste paper. In many cases, my attitude was resolute. There was no room for negotiation. The flight attendant's brows were tightly locked, and I knew in my heart that I was determined not to intervene. At this moment, a man stumbled over from economy class. It was the pregnant woman's husband, Gao Ming. He pushed away the flight attendant who was in the way, rushed to my seat. His eyes were red. His face was full of embarrassment. The previous arrogance and impatience had long since disappeared. Only panic and remorse remained. Plopping, kneeling directly in front of me in front of everyone. This move instantly quieted the entire first-class cabin, and everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. He kowtowed hard while collapsing and crying. I was wrong. We really know we were wrong. We shouldn't forcibly occupy your seat. We sincerely apologize to you. As long as you are willing to save my wife, I am willing to do whatever you ask me to do. Kowtow to you and apologize, and be a cow and a horse for you. I am willing. He banged his head the floor, making a banging sound, and it looked like he regretted it to the extreme. I looked at him coldly and condescendingly, without the slightest movement on my face, and said indifferently, now I know that I regret admitting my mistake. When I was at ease and grabbed my seat and morally kidnapped me, why didn't I think that I would end up today? I said a long time ago that I am not an obstetrician and gynecologist and cannot save her at all. Gao Ming raised his head suddenly. His face was full of extreme despair, and he hurriedly shook his head. No, 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 you can save. You must have the ability to save. He seemed to grab the last straw and eagerly explained. My wife's attending doctor is Director Li of Ruihua Hospital. She has long told me that the most powerful expert in their department is a young female doctor surnamed Zhou. That person must be you. Right. As he spoke, he immediately took out his mobile phone and clicked on a photo, which was exactly what I was speaking at an academic forum in a white coat, and my name and professional title were clearly printed on the background board. Zhou Jing, Deputy Chief Physician of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of Ruihua Hospital. I looked at the photo. My eyes narrowed slightly, and it was instantly clear that they were not a chance encounter at all. They had been prepared for a long time and deliberately set up a game for me. And I was completely sure that I spent this 800 yuan upgrade to buy not only a quiet and comfortable seat, but also a profound lesson for them that was tailor-made and could make them cry and couldn't find a place to reason. My words were like an exploding thunder, which instantly caused an uproar. And Gao Ming, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly stiffened, looked up at me. His face was instantly pale and bloodless. His eyes were full of disbelief, and he trembled and said, how do you know everything? His voice was trembling because of extreme fear. I looked at him condescendingly and coldly. My eyes were as cold as a scalpel, and I spoke. How could I not know? Gao Ming, 29 years old, unemployed vagrant. The woman next to you is called Lin Wei, 26 years old, the so-called freelancer. Neither of you are the original passengers of this flight at all. Your ticket was bought from the ticket dealer at a high price through illegal channels late last night. The purpose is to deliberately board this flight, stage a bitter trick at an altitude of 30,000 feet, and morally kidnap in the name of a pregnant woman to force me to help. Every time I said a word, Gao Ming's face turned pale, and the passengers and flight attendants around him were all stunned, looking at me in disbelief, and then at Gao Ming, who was kneeling on the ground. I didn't expect that behind an ordinary dispute over occupying a seat, there was such a complex conspiracy and calculation. The flight attendant was the first to react, and immediately winked at the flight attendant beside him. Hurry up and go backstage to verify the identity information of the two passengers. The young flight attendant immediately reacted, turned around and ran quickly to verify. Gao Ming instantly slumped on the ground, completely giving up all struggles. He knew in his heart that I was not lying to him at all. Every word I said was the real truth. I then leaned forward slightly, lowered my voice, and continued at a volume that only the two of us could hear. Let me tell you one more thing. The person who gave you this trap idea is my fiancé Qin Yang. Right. As long as you pretend to be pitiful enough, make a lot of noise and put pressure on me with the safety of people, I will definitely be soft-hearted and compromise and help. He even helped you take care of everything. Spent money to open the ticket dealer channel, and specially found out my flight travel information, which was clearly arranged from beginning to end. It's a pity that he did everything he could but missed one thing. I stared at him sharply and spoke slowly. He forgot to tell me that his lover hiding outside was pregnant, and he forgot that the most important thing in this world is the unpredictability of people's hearts. Gao Ming's whole body was shaken violently, as if he had been hit by a bolt from the blue, staring at me blankly, his lips trembling for a long time, unable to say a word, and his heart was full of endless panic. He originally thought that he was just cooperating with others to act in a play and get some benefits, but he never expected that he would have been used as a pawn and calculated, and he would be picked up by me on the spot. And the reason why I was able to find out all the inside information in advance was all thanks to my personal doctor, Sister Lee, who is not only a colleague I have worked with for many years, but also my mother's best friend. who has watched me grow up since I was a child, which is particularly reliable. The shameful deeds between Chen Yang and Lin Wei were the first to be found out, and then told me as soon as possible. Chen Yang is the administrative director of Ruihua Hospital, young and promising. Outstanding ability, or my father's proudest protege. My marriage to him was decided by the two elders a long time ago. In the eyes of outsiders, we are a perfect pair made in heaven. But I have never been polite to him between colleagues. And there is no love between men and women at all. That I always thought he had the same idea, until Sister Lee told me the truth. I didn't know that he had already raised a lover behind his back. That person was Lin Wei. And Lin Wei was already pregnant with his child. Chen Yang himself has asthenospermia, and it is difficult for a woman to conceive, so he attaches great importance to this hard-won child. But Lin Wei's physical foundation is extremely poor. The risk of pregnancy is extremely high, and no doctor in the hospital dares to take over her prenatal examination and follow-up fetal protection. And finally he actually hit me with a crooked mind. He knew that I was an authoritative expert in the field of obstetrics and gynecology, and he also knew that I had a strong personality. And I hated other people's deception and moral kidnapping in my bones. So he didn't dare to bow his head directly and ask me for help. So he could only go to great lengths to set up such a drama of chance encounters in the air, trying to use my professional ethics and the pressure of public opinion that human life was at stake to force me to compromise. As long as I rescued Lin Wei on the plane, after landing, in the face of media praise and external public opinion, I would no longer be able to get out of it. A good calculation of killing two birds with one stone, not only to save his child, but also to let me suffer dumb losses and suffer unspeakable. And he himself stayed out of the matter throughout the whole process, sat on the fisherman's benefits, and played the abacus extremely shrewdly. But he miscalculated the most important point. I, Zhou Jing, have never been a soft persimmon that can be manipulated at will. Sister Lee had already told me all their overall plans in advance, including how they were going to occupy seats, how to morally kidnap, and how to sell miserable and intercede. I am willing to spend 800 yuan to upgrade, not at all to be angry, but to deliberately draw a clear line with them, turning myself from a passive victim into an outsider who stays out of the matter. Only in this way can I firmly grasp the initiative when they are trying to see the dagger, and watch them play a good show that they directed and acted in abruptly into a tragedy that cannot end. Now, it's time for everything to be revealed. The flight attendant who had just gone to verify the passenger information also hurriedly ran back, nodded lightly to the flight attendant. His face was difficult to see, and reported in a low voice. The flight attendant. The identity information of the two people in seats A and B in the 15th row is completely inconsistent with the registration in the boarding system. The truth was completely revealed to the world, and all passengers looked at Gao Ming, who was slumped on the ground with contempt and anger. Deceiving calculations and using human lives as acting bargaining chips, which had already broken through everyone's moral bottom line. I leaned on the seat, picked up the water again, looked at the flight attendant lightly, and said calmly, "Now, do you still think I should save her?" These words were not only a question to the flight attendant, but also a question of everyone present who advised me to be soft-hearted. As the person in charge of this flight, she was in an unprecedented dilemma. Intellectually, she knew that what Gao Ming and Lin Wei did was extremely bad, and I had every reason to stand by. But the duties and humanitarianism made her unable to watch a life die on the plane. She spoke with difficulty. "Dr. Zhou, I admit that they are outrageously wrong and irrefutable, but the child in the belly is innocent. This life is also real. No matter what they do wrong, we can't watch her have an accident and lose her life." The surrounding passengers also followed suit and persuaded. "Yes, doctor, no matter what the adult's conduct is, the child is innocent, and it is important to save people first. These two people are really bad. Just call the police to arrest them directly after getting off the plane. Let them accept legal punishment. And now it is still the most critical to save people." Public opinion began to surge again, but this time it was no longer a forced moral kidnapping, but a heartfelt humanitarian plea. Gao Ming also seemed to grab the last life-saving straw, quickly crawled over, hugged my calf tightly, and broke down and cried, "Dr. Zhou, I beg you, every mistake is the fault of the two of us. As long as you are willing to save Lin Wei and the child, I am willing to pay any price to make up for the mistake. I will give you all the money you want. Please be kind to save their mother and son." He cried hoarsely and embarrassed, and I looked down at him indifferently, like a clown, and asked lightly, "Money? Do you think I will lack your little money?" A rhetorical question instantly left him speechless. "Yes, I can easily upgrade without hesitation for 800 yuan, and I am a top expert in a big hospital. How can I look down on the little money in his hand?" Intense despair completely overdrowned him again. I gently pulled out the leg that was held by him, stood up slowly, looked down on him condescendingly, and looked around at everyone present, and slowly spoke. "If you want me to save her, you can." Everyone instantly cheered up, and their eyes all fell on me, waiting for my next step. "However, I have 3 conditions." I didn't have a loud voice, but I had an unbelievable aura, and then stretched out my first finger and looked at the flight attendant. Please turn on the mobile phone recording function and record the next conversation throughout the process. I want to confess to the camera in person. He, Lin Wei and my fiancé Chin Yang. How they planned this conspiracy trap from beginning to end. All the details must not be missed at all. The flight attendant was stunned for a moment, then reacted immediately, took out his mobile phone without hesitation, clicked on the video function, and the camera was aimed directly at Gao Ming, who had a pale face. I then stretched out my second finger and continued. Second, please trouble the airline to immediately draft a formal exemption agreement, which must be clearly written. I am at the urgent request of the flight crew. Under the extremely limited conditions of medical equipment and environment, out of humanitarian rescue, no matter what the final treatment result is, the pregnant woman and the child are alive or dead. I personally and the Ruehua hospital where I work do not bear any legal responsibility and moral investigation. The agreement must be signed by Gao Ming on the spot, and at least 5 first-class passengers must sign and testify. The flight attendant immediately nodded and agreed. No problem. I will immediately arrange for someone to print and handle it, and then immediately turn around and give instructions to the other flight attendants. I looked at Gao Ming again, stretched out a third finger, with a bit of playfulness in his eyes, and slowly spoke. You just said in person that you are willing to make any compensation and are willing to take out all your savings to atone for your sins. Gao Ming nodded desperately like a chicken pecking at rice. Count. I definitely count. As long as you are willing to save people, I will agree to anything. The corners of my mouth curled up with a hint of coldness, and I said lightly, very good. I want you and Lin Wei, plus Chin Yang, the mastermind behind the scenes. The 3 of us jointly contributed 5 million. This money does not need to be given to me personally. All of it is donated to the Chunlei project, which is specially used to support out-of school girls in poor mountainous areas. In addition, I ask you to send this donation to the designated public welfare account within 24 hours of the plane landing, and to publish a public apology letter in newspapers at or above the municipal level for 3 consecutive days, and officially apologize to me Zhou Jing and admit my mistake. The number of 5 million instantly stunned everyone present like a bombshell. Gao Ming instantly widened his eyes and muttered in disbelief. 5 million. He never expected that I would offer such high conditions. And this money was almost all the benefits and savings that he and Lin Wei got from Chin Yang. I looked at him coldly and asked, why? I can't bear it. I cried so sincerely and repented and apologized just now. Was it all pretending? Or in your heart? The lives of your wife and unborn child are not worth even 5 million. I was speechless when I said every word. Gao Ming was speechless, and the passengers around me also showed contempt, and couldn't help but complain. I was reluctant to pay the price of saving my life, and I was quite good at acting just now. This kind of person is not worthy of sympathy at all. The doctor should not be soft-hearted to save them. Let him regret it for the rest of his life. The pressure of public opinion is like a mountain, pressing on Gao Ming. He knows very well in his heart that he has no way out. If Lin Wei has an accident today and 1 corpse and 2 lives, he will not only not be able to reap the slightest benefit, but he will also live in endless regret and everyone's scolding and accusations for the rest of his life. He gritted his teeth and was cruel, made up his mind, and looked up with red eyes. I promise. I agree to all your conditions, as long as you are willing to save her. I will never regret it. I nodded in satisfaction. Okay, now I can start confessing the whole thing to the camera. I pulled a chair and sat down peacefully, like a judge in charge of life and death, quietly waiting for the sinner to be truthfully explained and judged. Gao Ming's confession process in front of the camera was particularly smooth, and under the huge pressure of the life and death choice, he did not dare to hide it at all. From how he met Lin Wei and Chin Yang, to being co-opted step by step, setting this trap, and then to the promise of benefits made by Chin Yang, as well as all the details of the whole plan, all of which were clearly explained. The flight attendant's mobile phone completely recorded all the confessions throughout the process. And this video will be ironclad evidence that Chin Yang will be discredited in the future. Soon, the flight attendant also brought the printed formal exemption agreement. Gao Ming trembled and signed his name on the agreement, pressed the bright red handprint, and several first-class passengers also signed out of righteous indignation and were willing to testify. All conditions were met, and there was no omission, and everyone's eyes were focused on me again. I took off my jacket, handed it to the flight attendant beside me, and said calmly, "Get me a first aid kit, saline, and all the gauze and bandages that could be found in the cabin, and close all the partition curtains in the first-class cabin. And no one is allowed to come near and watch except the flight attendants." My tone instantly switched to a professional and calm doctor's tone, and the lazy and indifferent passenger appearance just now completely faded and turned back into a calm and capable obstetrics and gynecology expert in Ruehua Hospital. The flight attendant was extremely efficient, and quickly prepared all the medical supplies I needed. And with the assistance of 2 flight attendants, I lifted the curtain and walked into economy class. As soon as she got closer, she smelled a pungent and strong smell of blood. Lin Wei was lying on 3 seats put together. Her face was as pale as paper. Her lips were bluish-purple, and a large area of crimson blood under her body was shocking. She had fallen into a semi-coma. Her breathing was weak, and the situation was even more dangerous and critical than I expected. I didn't hesitate at all, immediately put on medical gloves and stepped forward to check. "Hand me the blood pressure monitor." The flight attendant hurriedly handed it over. I quickly measured her blood pressure. The high pressure was only 60. The low pressure was 40, which was already a typical symptom of hemorrhagic shock. Immediately establish an intravenous passage. And the saline drips at full speed. I calmly gave the treatment instruction while gently lifting her clothes, ready to carefully examine the bleeding points. But when my hand touched her lower abdomen, the movement suddenly stopped, and her brows furrowed tightly in an instant. On the right side of her lower abdomen near the groin, I felt a slender, slightly raised scar, which looked like a trace left by the operation. From the length and position of the scar, very similar to ordinary appendicitis surgery. This book is nothing special, but what really sinks my heart is that there is an extremely hidden small tattoo at the end of the scar, which is a special logo composed of a string of letters and numbers, representing paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria B27 subtype. The moment I saw this tattoo, my pupils shrank suddenly, and my heart instantly sank to the bottom. This rare blood disease of PNH, especially the high-risk subtype of B27, patients have congenital defects in platelet function and extremely poor coagulation ability. Once a woman is pregnant, especially in the third trimester, with the enlargement of the uterus and hormonal changes, it is very easy to cause sudden massive bleeding, and the mortality rate is as high as 50. To put it bluntly, when a woman with this disease is pregnant, she is simply betting her life on luck that my brain was running fast, instantly figuring out all the joints. Chen Yang was in the position of administrator in the hospital. It was impossible not to know the fatal danger of this rare disease. Lin Wei set up a file in Ruihua Hospital for prenatal checkup. All the examination reports Chen Yang had read everything. He clearly knew that Lin Wei was seriously ill and not suitable for pregnancy at all, but he allowed her to insist on conceiving a child, and acquiesced to her cooperating in this high-altitude farce. This is not to save the child at all. It is clearly to use a knife to kill, and to take advantage of this inevitable bleeding accident to quietly get rid of Lin Wei and the child in her belly. A terrible guess was completely formed in my heart. Chen Yang's asthenospermia may be true, but he values this child as an illusion in disguise. His real purpose is to use this pregnancy and sudden accident to completely get rid of Lin Wei's burden, and naturally annex all the property under Lin Wei's name. And I, Zhou Jing, was calculated into the overall plan by him from the beginning, and became his most critical pawn. If I succeeded in treatment, he could stay out of the matter and enjoy the success. If I stand by and fail to save him, resulting in a tragedy of one corpse and 2 lives, he can still pretend to be an affectionate victim and win everyone's sympathy, which is really a vicious plan to kill people with a knife. I looked at Lin Wei, who was unconscious, and my heart felt cold. This woman was both pitiful and hateful. I am afraid that she would not know until she died, and the man she relied on had paved a dead end to hell for her from the beginning. I took a deep breath, suppressing the shock and chill in my heart. Now is not the time to delve into the conspiracy. The top priority is to save people. I must not let Chen Yang's vicious conspiracy succeed. And I must pull Lin Wei back from the gate of hell, let her live well, and see with her own eyes the true face of the devil of the person she loves. Hemostats. Gauze. Increase the amount of fluids. My voice sounded calmly in the narrow cabin, calm and firm, full of aura. At this moment, I no longer care about her fault of occupying my seat and morally kidnapping me, but with the heart of a doctor, I compete with the demons hidden behind the scenes for a fresh life. Time became particularly slow at this moment, slowing down to the point where every second seemed to be competing for time with death. In economy class, all passengers were comforted by the flight attendants and sat in their seats, but everyone's eyes passed through the seams, staring at the makeshift operating table in row 15. The air was filled with a pungent smell of blood and disinfectant, and Lin Wei's vital signs were like a kite with a broken thread, falling down one after another. And she kept losing blood. Her paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria B27 subtype made all my conventional methods of stopping bleeding useless, and the sutured wound was the same as without stitches, and the blood still stubbornly seeped out of the uterine wound, staining red one gauze after another. I immediately shouted, "No, you must do uterine tamponade immediately. This is the only way that may work without professional equipment." And then I shouted to the flight attendant next to me, "Give me all the gauze." My voice was not loud, but with the strength that could not be refused. The young flight attendant had long been frightened and confused, and when he heard my words, he mechanically handed me a pack of sterile gauze. I unpacked the package and filled the long strips of gauze, little by little, into Lin Wei's still bleeding uterus. This work is particularly delicate, and if it is loosened, it will not play a role in compressing and stopping bleeding, and if it is too tight, it may injure or even break the fragile uterine wall. My forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, and the plane was a little bumpy, as if there had been a big earthquake, which especially tested the stability of my hands. The surroundings were so quiet that the sound of needles falling to the ground could be heard, and everyone held their breath. Only the faint and rapid dripping sound of the instrument and my own heavy heartbeat. My mind was blank. There was no Chen Yang, no conspiracy, no betrayal, only the person in front of me who was slowly losing his life, and my most primitive instinct as a doctor to save her. I must save her, not for her, but for myself, for the revenge that must be particularly tragic that I am about to unfold. I need a living witness, the most powerful weapon that can testify to Qin Yang and completely nail him to the pillar of shame. So Lin Wei, you can't die. At least not now. At this time, the flight attendant shouted with a crying voice. The blood pressure is still dropping. The number on the monitor had fallen below the 50-30 danger line, and Lin Wei's heartbeat began to be chaotic. I calmly gave the order, get ready for adrenaline. The movement of my hands didn't stop at all, and sweat fell down my cheeks and dripped onto my gloves. Finally, the last piece of gauze was sent in by me. The entire uterus was filled. I breathed a long sigh of relief, pressed the wound of the uterine cavity with gauze, and the blood finally flowed a little slower. But the danger was not relieved at all, and the organ failure caused by hemorrhagic shock could take her life at any time. I shouted again, continue the infusion, keep the venous passage open, and monitor her heart rate and blood oxygen closely. Then I stood up, moved my waist, which had been stiff for a while, and was highly tense, and my body couldn't bear it a little. The flight attendant handed over a bottle of water, his tone full of awe. Dr. Shou, you have worked hard. I shook my head, my eyes still locked on Lin Wei's face, and asked her, contact the captain. How long will it take for us to land? The flight attendant said, the captain has contacted the ground and is applying for an emergency alternate route, which will take 30 minutes at the earliest. 30 minutes. I usually just take a nap, but now, it is the distance between life and death. I looked at Lin Wei's bloodless face, and I knew in my heart that we were just taking a breather for a while. The real battle had just begun, and the god of death was still waiting at the door. Just waiting for me to show a little flaw. The plane began to descend, and the slight weightlessness of the fuselage as it passed through the clouds lifted everyone's spirits. The captain's calm voice came from the radio. Dear passengers, due to a medical emergency, this flight will be urgently landed at the airport in the city ahead, and it is expected to land in 25 minutes. And the ground ambulance personnel are ready. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. There was a burst of relieved applause in the economy class. Gao Ming sat paralyzed on the aisle floor, holding his head, his body trembling because of fear and joy. His eyes looking at me were particularly complicated. There was gratitude, there was fear, and more of a dazed for the rest of his life. The eyes of the crew at me have completely changed. Before it was a request and helplessness. Now only pure respect and admiration remain. I didn't have the heart to pay attention to these looks. All my attention was still on Lin Wei. Her blood pressure barely rose to 7,040 under the effect of a lot of rehydration and drugs, and her heart rate slowly stabilized, which was temporarily stable. I took off my blood-stained gloves and threw them into the medical garbage bag, and was about to sit down to rest for a while, when Lin Wei, who was originally unconscious, suddenly trembled slightly, and she woke up. Although she only regained consciousness briefly, her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something. I immediately leaned down and put my ear to her mouth, her voice so weak that it was like a mosquito humming. No, child, it's not. Just a few words intermittently. Not a sentence. I frowned and asked, what is not? Lin Wei's eyes flashed with extreme panic and struggle, and she used all her strength to squeeze out 2 words from her throat. His. After saying that, she fell into a coma again. My heart sank suddenly. His. Which him? Is it Qin Yang? Or the nominal husband Gao Ming next to her? If the child is not Qin Yang's, then what is the purpose of he putting so much effort into setting up such a big situation? A big mystery rose in my heart. I looked at Lin Wei's face, and for the first time I felt that this woman may not be as simple as it seems. What is the relationship between her and Qin Yang and Gao Ming? What deeper purpose is hidden behind this carefully planned aerial horror? At this moment, the flight attendant walked over quickly with a satellite phone and interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Shou. It was transferred from the tower, saying that it was Director Chen of Ruihua Hospital. Your fiancé. He said that there was a very urgent matter and he had to call you immediately. Here. I sneered in my heart. Count the time. It's time for him to get the news. I took the phone and pressed the answer button. Hello. I can't hear any emotion in my voice. Chen Yang was particularly concerned on the other end of the phone, and even with an anxious and trembling voice. Jingjing. Jingjing. Are you okay? I just received a call from the airline, saying that your plane had an accident and needed to make an emergency landing, which scared me to death. His acting skills are still so good. People who don't know will really think that he is a good man who is worried about the safety of his fiancée. I replied lightly, I'm fine. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. That's good. I heard that there is a pregnant woman on the plane who is bleeding profusely, and the situation is very dangerous. You didn't make a move, did you? He was testing me to see if I had fallen into the trap he had set. I said directly, I made a move. The other end of the phone was silent for 3 seconds, and I could almost imagine the expression on his face at the moment, which must have been shocked, confused, and disappointed. Soon he adjusted, and his tone became particularly relieved and proud. As expected of my Jingjing, it is really the benevolence of a doctor. In that case, It must be very hard. Right. Fortunately, I said, and my tone became playful. Speaking of which, this patient is quite special. Oh, how special. She has a very rare blood disease called PNHB27. I said the term clearly word by word. This disease. There are serious disorders in blood coagulation function. Pregnancy is a taboo, especially on an airplane. Changes in air pressure can easily induce heavy bleeding. 9 deaths. You say, as her family, or as a hospital staff who knew about her condition. Is it a bit to allow her to fly long distances at this time? Too irresponsible. Every word I said was like a knife stabbing Chin Yang on the other end of the phone. There was only his heavy breathing on the phone, and this time he was silent for a long time, a full 10 seconds. And then said in a calm tone that he tried to pretend. Jing, what are you talking about? I don't really understand. I'm just an administrator after all. I'm just glad that with you on the plane, a tragedy was avoided. He is a hero to all. He bit the word hero very hard, as if reminding me and warning me. I laughed. I don't dare to be a hero. I just did what I had to do. Okay, the plane is about to land. I'll hang up first. Before he could speak again, I hung up the phone. I looked at the lights on the ground outside the window getting closer and closer. My eyes were as cold as Siberian ice. Chen Yang. The game began. When the plane landed, the huge impact made everyone feel grounded. The hatch opened, and a fresh air mixed with the smell of grass and earth poured in. And outside the porthole, the alternating red and blue warning lights had long illuminated the apron as if it were daytime. Ambulances, police cars, and even a few interview cars with media license plates. And the battle was bigger than I imagined. When I was the last to walk out of the cabin and handed Lin Wei to the ground first responders, I explained to them in the most concise and professional words about my condition and the emergency treatment I had done on board. After listening to my narration, the leading emergency doctor looked at me with shock and admiration. Under that condition, you can do this, doctor. You have done wonders. I just nodded and didn't say much. Gao Ming, as another party to the incident, was taken away by 2 airport policemen, who were going to be investigated for buying fake tickets and picking quarrels and provoking trouble on the plane. And before being taken away, he looked at me deeply, and then bowed heavily in my direction, and I watched him be taken away expressionlessly, without the slightest wave in my heart. As I walked down the gangway and was about to enter the terminal, the expected flashing lights lit up wildly, and the reporters instantly surrounded me like sharks smelling blood. Doctor, what are you thinking when you save people from an altitude of 10,000 meters? How did you complete that thrilling rescue with poor equipment? May I ask if you and the pregnant woman had an unpleasant experience in economy class before? Did that affect your rescue decision? One question after another came like a cannonball, and I knew that the heroic script in Chin Yang's mouth had already begun. He wanted to use public opinion to lift me up and make me a morally perfect person, a model of saving lives and healing the wounded, so that I could not let go of Lin Wei's follow-up treatment, and even be forced to accept the dirty relationship between him and Lin Wei, because a hero cannot have flaws. Unfortunately, I never wanted to be a hero. I stopped, facing countless cameras and microphones, without the slightest joy or excitement on my face. Only a sense of calm and just the right amount of exhaustion. Thank you for your concern, I said slowly, my voice clear and powerful. I'm not a hero. I'm just a doctor, and I did what I had to do. What really deserves our attention is not me personally, but why this patient appeared on this flight. My words instantly silenced the scene, and all reporters were keenly aware that there was more exciting news in it. I paused and continued. This pregnant woman, with extremely rare paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, also known as PNH, is a disease with serious impairment of blood clotting function. For this type of patient, pregnancy itself is a huge adventure and must be carried out under the supervision of the top medical team. Making her endure drastic changes in air pressure on a long-distance plane in the 3rd trimester is tantamount to a deliberate murder. I bit the word murder extremely hard, and the scene was in an uproar, and the eyes of the reporters lit up like light bulbs. I looked at the camera, as if looking at Chin Yang on the other end of the camera. I don't know who made such a hasty and irresponsible decision, but I believe that the hospital leaders and ethics committee of our Ruihua hospital will definitely conduct the most thorough and serious investigation into this matter. Find out who it is, treat the doctor's order as child's play, and put the patient's life in such a dangerous situation. This is not only irresponsible for a life, but also a humiliation to our entire medical industry. I, Zhou Jing, Deputy Chief Physician of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of Ruihua Hospital, will personally follow up on this matter until it comes to light. After saying that, I turned around and left, escorted by airport security, leaving behind a sea of flashing lights and countless faces dull from shock. I didn't give Chin Yang any chance. I directly set fire to his base camp and used a grander justice to fight against the morality he was trying to impose on me. In the VIP lounge arranged by the airline, I took a sip of water, took out my phone, and there were 2 unread messages on the screen. The first was sent by Sisterly. He knows that you have stabbed things out, and now he is frantically contacting the leaders of the hospital to try to suppress it. Be careful. The second one came from an unfamiliar number. Be careful. He is not an actor. He is a madman. LW. Lin Wei. My pupils contracted again, and she was in the ambulance and sent me this message on someone else's mobile phone. Be careful. The man who looked cowardly and was so frightened that he peed. Isn't he an actor invited by Chin Yang? But crazy. I suddenly realized that I seemed to have underestimated the complexity of this game from the beginning, and it was probably not only Chin Yang who fell into the trap, but also me. The air conditioner in the VIP lounge was as cold as an ice cellar. I held my mobile phone. My fingertips were cold. And the text message from Lin Wei was like a poisonous snake entrenched in my mind. Be careful. He is not an actor. He is a madman. This sentence completely overturned all my previous presuppositions. Gao Ming was not hired by Chin Yang. In other words, he was not just hired by Chin Yang. A madman is the most uncontrollable variable in all plans. Why did Chin Yang use a madman? What does he want? Or is it that even Chin Yang can't control this madman? My head began to ache, and the whole thing was like a ball of yarn played with by a cat. It seemed to have found the thread, but it became more and more messy. The door of the lounge was gently pushed open. Chen Yang walked in. He changed into a dark casual suit. His hair was combed meticulously, and his face was just the right amount of tiredness and worry. He quickly walked up to me and took me into his arms. Jingjing, you scared me to death. His voice was hoarse, and the hug was very powerful, as if he wanted to convey a calming strength to me. I didn't move. Let him hold it, but my body was like a stiff piece of wood. I could smell the familiar smell of cologne on his body, mixed with the smell of hospital disinfectant, and a strange lattice perfume that I had never smelled before. Very faint, but very clear. I gently pushed him away and opened the distance between us. I'm fine. I looked him in the eye. You seem to be busy, my words meant, and the expression on his face was momentarily stagnant, but it immediately returned to its original state. Just came from the hospital, he explained. The hospital leaders were alarmed and held an emergency meeting to discuss how to deal with the media that he wanted to divert my attention with praise and honor, which is his usual trick. I smiled, picked up the water on the table and took a sip. The face is small, the human life is big. I just don't understand. Lin Wei's prenatal checkup has been done in our hospital. Her medical records. You should know better than anyone else. PNHB 27. Third trimester. Long distance flight. I drove these words into his ears one by one, like nails. Chen Yang, you are an experienced administrator. Tell me, is this a deliberate murder? My eyes were staring, and my eyes were pierced like knives, but he didn't hide. He just looked at me so straight. Of course I knew there was a risk in this. He sighed softly, his face showing a look of helplessness and self-blame. But what could I do? Lin Wei, she was very emotionally unstable, and she had to leave the city to return to her hometown. I couldn't persuade her no matter how much I tried to persuade her, so I could only buy her a first-class cabin, thinking that the first-class class would be more comfortable. And the risk was smaller. How could I have imagined that she would temporarily exchange tickets with a man named Gao Ming and run to take economy class? He said this flawlessly, putting all the blame on Lin Wei's bad mood. And Gao Ming suddenly appeared and picked himself clean, but became a helpless and affectionate victim. If I hadn't received Lin Wei's text message, if I hadn't smelled the strange smell of perfume on his body, maybe I would have really believed him a little. But now, I just feel disgusted. Is it? I put down the water glass in my hand and asked slowly. So you don't know that one named Gao Ming? Chen Yang immediately nodded, with a sincere face, and said that he didn't know him. I also just heard this name from the airport police. I heard that he seemed to be Lin Wei's ex-boyfriend, and he had been pestering Lin Wei. And this time, maybe he planned it by him. He just threw all the pot to Gao Ming, a crazy ex-boyfriend who was entangled endlessly. This identity can indeed explain a lot of things, and it can also make him get rid of his crimes smoothly. I stood up and picked up my handbag. In that case, let's wait for the results of the police investigation. I'm too tired and have to go back to rest. I really don't want to play with him anymore, and I feel that the air is dirty if I stay for a second longer. I'll see you off. And he immediately followed. No. I turned around and looked at him. A smile appeared on my face. Chen Yang, I suddenly felt that the smell of this perfume on your body was quite special. What brand is it? His face changed instantly. It was the panic and astonishment of being exposed to the lie on the spot, and he couldn't hide it. I didn't wait for him to answer. I opened the door and walked out. Outside the door, Sisterly had been waiting for me for a long time. She drove the car and stopped at the exit of the VIP channel. I got into the co-pilot, fastened my seatbelt. He panicked. Sisterly looked at Chin Yang frozen in the rearview mirror and sneered. It's not just panicked. I leaned on the back of the chair, closed my eyes. Sisterly, help me check someone. Gao Ming, I want to know everything about him. His background. What is his relationship with Lin Wei? Anne, what a crazy madman he is. The car drove away from the airport steadily, leaving the lights behind me and those conspiracies far behind. I knew in my heart that this game of chess was much more complicated than I thought, and I had no way out. I could only go to the end step by step to see how big the pit was hidden at the end of this chessboard. I didn't go home, so I asked Sisterly to drive directly to the central hospital where Lin Wei was admitted, and I had to see her immediately. Immediately, Lin Weiss sentenced the child is not his and the sentence be careful and clever stuck in my heart like two thorns. And if I don't understand, I can't sleep or eat at all. The emergency building was as bright as it was during the day. And as a doctor at Ruihua Hospital, I didn't have much effort to ask Lin Weiss ward, the obstetrics and gynecology intensive care unit. But when I walked to the door of the care room in a white coat, two men in black suits stopped me. They were tall and had no expression on their faces, like two door gods. Sorry, Mr. Chen ordered that no one could visit, and one of them spoke, his voice cold and hard. Chen Yang's movements are also too fast. I have only left the airport for half an hour. He has already set up a net here. He wants to completely control Lin Wei. Not let her have any contact with the outside world, especially not let me contact. What is he afraid of? I'm afraid Lin Wei will tell me more truth. I am Dr. Zhou Jing from Ruihua Hospital. I took out my ID and showed him that Lin Wei was the patient I rescued on the plane. And I have to understand her follow-up situation, which is my duty. Sorry, we only listened to Mr. Chen's orders, and those two bodyguards did not enter. I sneered. Mr. Chen? Which Mr. Chen? Who is he to the patient? Husband? Or immediate family? As far as I know, no. Why should he restrict me from visiting patients? My voice suddenly raised and attracted the attention of other doctors and nurses in the hallway. Get out of the way. I took a step forward. My aura was full. If you stop me again, I will call the police on charges of illegal detention. I want to see if Qin Yang's order is big or the law is big. The two bodyguards looked at each other. Their eyes were a little hesitant. They just used people's money to eliminate disasters for others, but they didn't want to get into a lawsuit. At this moment, a voice that I didn't want to hear the last came from behind them. Jingjing, why are you here? Chen Yang walked out of the ward. He had already changed into a white coat, with the badge of the administrative director of Ruihua Hospital hanging on his chest, with just the right amount of surprise and reproach on his face. There are professional doctors and nurses here. You have been running around for a day. It's time to have a good rest. That he came over to take my hand. I dodged sideways. I came to see my patient. I looked him in the eye. Director Chin. You seem to have forgotten. I am also a doctor in this hospital. You have forgotten even more. You are not qualified to decide for the patient who can visit and who cannot. My words are not polite at all. There are already a few medical staff around to watch the fun. Chen Yang's face is a little unbearable. His eyes flash with a hint of ruthlessness, but he quickly regained that gentle and elegant appearance. Jingjing, you misunderstood. He explained softly. Lin Wei has just finished the operation. Her body is very weak. The doctor suggests absolute rest. I am just afraid that too many people will disturb her. Since you are here, of course you can go in and take a look. He waved at the two bodyguards and let Dr. Zhou in. He pretended to be a reasonable gentleman, but I knew in my heart that he was retreating to advance. And the more he did this, the more it showed that he had a ghost in his heart. I ignored him and pushed the door straight into the ward. Lin Wei was lying on the hospital bed, with various tubes inserted. Her face was still pale, but her breathing was much more stable. And when she saw me, a complicated look flashed in her eyes. There was gratitude, fear, and call for help. Chen Yang followed me in and closed the door. Lin Wei, how do you feel? He walked to the hospital bed. His tone was so gentle that he could drip water, and he reached out to touch Lin Wei's hair. But Lin Wei's body shrank subconsciously. That movement was very subtle, but full of resistance. I could see it clearly. Director Chin. I interrupted his performance. I want to talk to the patient alone. Chen Yang turned around and looked at me with a smile. Is there anything I can't hear? Shouldn't we talk about everything? Jingjing. He used our fiancé relationship to oppress me. I walked to the opposite side of him and confronted him across the hospital bed. Of course. I said word by word. For example, I want to ask Miss Lin Wei who the child in her belly is. For another example, I want to ask her what the relationship between that madman named Gao Ming and you. Director Chin. As soon as I finished speaking, the atmosphere in the room instantly froze. The smile on Qin Yang's face was completely gone, replaced by a cold killing intent that was touched by the reverse scales. Lin Wei was lying on the bed. Her eyes widened suddenly. Her body trembled slightly because of excitement. And on the monitor, her heart rate began to soar rapidly. Zhou Jing. Chen Yang roared, his voice full of warnings. Don't talk nonsense here and irritate patients. Am I talking nonsense? You know best in your heart. I am not afraid to meet his gaze. Chen Yang, put away your hypocritical face. Do you think that by locking up Lin Wei, you can gag her? Do you think you can stop me by finding two bodyguards? Let me tell you, this matter is not over. I took out my mobile phone, clicked on the recording function, and put the mobile phone next to Lin Wei's pillow. Miss Lin Wei, you don't need to say anything now. Just nod or shake your head. Your child. Is it Qin Yang's? I stared at her eyes. Lin Wei's lips trembled. Tears flowed down the corners of her eyes. Her eyes passed me, looking at Qin Yang behind me. Her eyes were full of fear. And then, under Qin Yang's murderous gaze, she shook her head slowly, but extremely firmly. That shaking his head was like a loud slap in Qin Yang's face. And it was also like a key opening Pandora's box. Qin Yang's face instantly turned blue. The murderous intent in his eyes could no longer be hidden. If his eyes could kill, Lin Wei would have been cut by him 1,000 times at this moment. You're crazy. He lowered his voice and squeezed these 3 words out of between his teeth. Not to me, but to Lin Wei. His voice was full of threats and violence. Lin Wei trembled with fright, closed her eyes, and didn't dare to look at him anymore. And the monitor made a sharp alarm sound. A nurse heard the sound and immediately pushed the door and rushed in. What's going on? The nurse glanced at the monitor, and then at the 3 of us. Her face was full of vigilance. The patient was emotional, and her blood pressure was elevated. Please leave immediately. Chen Yang took a deep breath, forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart, tidied up his white coat, and regained his calm appearance. Okay, let's go right away. He nodded to the nurse, and then turned to look at me. Jingjing, let's go out to talk. His tone was frighteningly calm. I picked up Lin Wei's mobile phone next to her pillow and turned off the recording. I knew that today's purpose had been achieved. I successfully tore a crack between Chen Yang and Lin Wei, and confirmed with my own eyes the most critical thing: the child. Not Chen Yang's. Walking out of the ward, Chen Yang was silent all the way and took me to an unincorporated balcony at the end of the corridor. The evening breeze lifted the corners of his clothes and blew away the last bit of disguise on his face. Tell me. He lit a cigarette and took a sharp puff. What do you want? He no longer called me Jingjing, nor did he pretend to be that affectionate fiancé, and there was a complete showdown between us. What do I think? I looked at him and felt a little funny. This sentence. I should ask you. Chen Yang, what do you want? Find a terminally ill woman. Let her get pregnant with a child who doesn't know whose it is, and then design an earth-shattering air rescue, and finally push me to the altar of heroes, or for something else. He flicked the soot and didn't answer my question directly. Zhou Jing, you are very smart. He looked at the night view of the city in the distance and said slowly, smarter than all the women I know. But sometimes, being too smart is not a good thing. Some things, you don't know, are better for you. He was warning me not to pursue it further. Is it? I walked up to him and stood side by side with him. But unfortunately, I don't have any advantages. I just have a lot of curiosity. The more you don't want me to know, the more I want to figure out. For example, who is Gao Ming? For another example, what shameful deal is there between you and Lin Wei? Chen Yang was silent, smoking one cigarette after another. The smoke blurred his handsome face and the emotions in his eyes. It took a long time for him to extinguish the cigarette butt and throw it into the trash can. Since you have to know, then let me tell you. He turned around and looked at me again. His eyes became particularly complicated, ruthless, unwilling, and a struggle that I couldn't understand. That's right. The child is not mine. Lin Wei is not my lover. The child in her belly is clever. And Gao Ming is a complete madman. A paranoid and violent stalker. He has pestered Lin Wei for many years. Lin Wei can't get rid of him, and was even raped by him, pregnant with a child. This opening is similar to what I expected. A victim. A perpetrator. What about you? I asked him. What role do you play in this play? Me. Chen Yang smiled self-deprecatingly. I am a fool who wants to be a hero, but turns himself into a devil. He looked at me. His eyes actually had sadness. Lin Wei's father, one of the directors of Ruihua Group. Lin Donghai. Do you know about this? I was stunned. Ruihua Group is the largest shareholder of our hospital. The name Lin Donghai, I have long been thunderous, is the most powerful person in the group except the chairman. I never knew. Lin Wei is actually his daughter. Lin Dong is such a daughter, pampered since she was a child, but also strictly managed. Lin Wei and Gao Ming's affairs, he didn't know at all. If he let him know, Lin Wei was pregnant out of wedlock, pregnant with a street gangster child. He could break Lin Wei's leg. So, Lin Wei found me. She begged me to help her, saying that as long as I could help her solve Gao Ming, dispose of this child, and then help her hide this matter, she would let her father, at the next board meeting, nominate me as the vice president of Ruihua Hospital. The position of vice president was what he dreamed of. And it was also my father who promised us to get married before he would use his relationship to help him. And it turned out that he couldn't wait a long time ago. So, you planned all this? I asked. Yes, he nodded. Our original plan was to use the change in air pressure at high altitude on the plane to induce Lin Wei's PNH, causing an accidental miscarriage. I bought a flight attendant on that flight, prepared all the first aid equipment. As long as the child was gone, Lin Wei was relieved. Gao Ming's madman. Without the child to blackmail, it would be much easier to deal with. And you? He looked at me. His eyes became more complicated. You are the most important part of this plan. I need an authoritative, top expert to prove that this accident is force majeure. I need you to say to everyone in person, you have done your best, but you can't save it, so that everything is perfect. Lin Wei got out of trouble. I got what I wanted. And you can also reap a good reputation for saving lives and healing the wounded. I listened to his words, only to feel a cold air rushing straight from the soles of my feet to the heavenly spirit cover. This man, too scheming, too ruthless, not saving people at all, clearly in the next big chess game, taking everyone's fate as a pawn. It's a pity that I looked at him coldly. You miscalculated a step. You didn't expect that I would save her. That's right. There was a hint of annoyance on his face. I underestimated your ability, and I also overestimated Lin Wei's useless body. Not to mention that Gao Ming's madman would change his mind temporarily and run to play a seat-occupying play with you. completely disrupting my rhythm. Zhou Jing. He took a step forward, grabbed my wrist. His hand was cold and hard. Now, the plan failed. Lin Wei survived. The child was temporarily saved. Gao Ming was taken away by the police. Who knows what he would say? We are now grasshoppers on a rope. Help me. He looked at me with burning eyes. Help me complete the last step. As long as that child quietly disappears on the operating table, I can not only be the vice president. Lin Dong promised to give me all the benefits. I will share half of you. We are still the best partners. The most perfect fiancé. He threw me a devil's deal. A deal full of blood and temptation. I looked at him quietly. At my nominal fiancé. At my father's proudest prot. At this gentle and promising young talent in the eyes of outsiders. At this moment. His face no longer had his usual gentleness and calmness, only naked desire and undisguised ruthlessness. Share half of me. Are we still the best partners? I suddenly laughed, laughing loudly and cheerfully, laughing so inexplicably that his face became even darker. What are you laughing at? He asked, with pent-up anger in his voice. I held back my laughter and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. I laughed at you, Chen Yang. I laughed at you for being too naive. Do you think that a vice president's position, a little money, can buy me? Do you think that I, Zhou Jing, am a chess piece that you call and wave away? I took a step forward, approached him, and narrowed the distance between us to a foot, and I could clearly see the astonishment and confusion in his eyes. Your plan sounds perfect. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone, or even 4 eagles. Which not only solves Lin Wei's troubles, but also helps you clear the obstacles to becoming vice president, and by the way, pushes me to a moral high ground that I can't get down, and obey you in the future. Chen Yang, you are really good at calculating. My tone was full of mockery. But unfortunately, your plan was full of loopholes from the beginning, and your biggest loophole was that you were too conceited. You thought you were in control of everything, thinking that everyone would act obediently according to the script you wrote. You were wrong. I shook my head, as if looking at a poor fool. You underestimated me. It's nothing. If you underestimate Lin Wei, it can only mean that you don't know people clearly. But you should never underestimate the madman named Gao Ming. Speaking of Gao Ming, Chen Yang's pupils shrank. Do you think he's just an impulsive, paranoid stalker? Do you think that if you send him to the police station, he will become fish on the chopping board and be slaughtered by you? Chen Yang, do you really know him? Do you know why he was on that flight? He is not here to disrupt the situation. He is here to harvest your plans, harvest your and Lin Wei's secrets, and your future. My words were like sharp knives stuck into Chen Yang's heart, and the blood on his face faded little by little. What do you mean? He finally panicked. It's not interesting. I took a step back and distanced myself again. I just want to remind you that a child who is alive, with the blood of the Lin family, and is still recognized by law, is much more valuable than a stillborn fetus who dies quietly on the operating table. And it is also much more interesting. Chen Yang raised his head suddenly, staring at me. He finally understood what I meant. I didn't want to destroy this chess piece. I wanted to raise it into a time bomb that was enough to completely blow up the Lin family and him. Chen Yang, you're crazy. He looked at me like he was looking at a monster. And you would ruin everyone. No. I smiled and shook my head. I will only ruin those who want to destroy me. Chen Yang, listen up. From now on, Lin Wei will take over. I will decide her treatment plan. I will do her surgery. You and your people, it's best to stay away from her. Otherwise, I paused, leaned into his ear, and said softly in a voice that only the two of us could hear. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind letting Lin Dong watch a good show of his future son-in-law in advance. After saying that, I stopped looking at him, turned around and walked out of this suffocating balcony, leaving him alone in a daze in the wind. I know that from this moment on, there is no room for maneuver between us. Either you die or I die. I asked Sister Lee to drive the car back to my bachelor apartment. I didn't say a word along the way. Chen Yang's face was repeatedly played back in my mind. From the shock at the beginning, to the fear later, and finally to despair. To be honest, I was quite enjoyable to watch him like that, but it was not enough. This was just the beginning at most. When I got home, I threw myself directly into the hot water of the bathtub, trying to dispel the chill and fatigue on my body by the high temperature. But not long after soaking, the mobile phone rang out of place. It was Sister Lee who called. Her voice was a little solemn, and as soon as she opened her mouth, she said that she had found out Gao Ming's situation, and then told me that Gao Ming was Chinese New Year's Eve this year, and Lin Wei was a fellow townsman, and his parents both died when he was 10 years old because of a factory accident, and the person in charge of that factory was Lin Wei's father, Lin Donghai. My heart sank suddenly. It turned out that there was such a layer of origin in it. Sister Lee went on to say that the compensation for the accident was deducted layer by the factory leaders at that time, and in the hands of Gao Ming and his elderly grandmother, there was not much left. He dropped out of school before graduating from high school to mix with society, did a lot of low-level work, and entered the police station several times, all of which were petty theft cases. But since 5 years ago, a large amount of unknown funds have been deposited into his bank account, And this person is very strange, just like a ghost. No fixed residence, no social media, almost no interaction with anyone. The only thing he is obsessed with is staring at Lin Wei. Sisterly also said that we found out that Lin Wei has been living in his shadow since college. Changing her mobile phone number, moving, calling the police. No matter how she gets it, he is like a maggot attached to the bone. He can't get rid of it. Lin Wei has done a very secret job when she returned to China this time. But Gao Ming still knew her itinerary for the first time. Even earlier than Qin Yang. I sat up from the bathtub, water droplets fell down my skin, and at this moment I realized that Gao Ming, this man, is more terrifying than I thought. He is not the kind of simple paranoia that breeds hate because of love. He is a poisonous snake that has been dormant for 20 years, and has been waiting for an opportunity to launch the most fatal revenge against the Lin family and Lin Donghai. And Lin Wei is the best breakthrough he chose. As for that child, I am afraid it is not an accident, but the most critical link in his plan. She said that after Gao Ming was taken away from the airport, he stayed in the police station for less than 3 hours before he was bailed. And the person who bailed him was a very famous lawyer. And the biggest client of the lawyer's firm was Ruihua Group. My brain buzzed. The lawyer of Ruihua Group bailed Gao Ming. How is this possible? Is it Lin Donghai's meaning? Impossible. If Lin Donghai knew about Gao Ming's existence and wanted him to disappear from this world, who would it be? A thought suddenly popped into my head and made me instantly chill. At this moment, my mobile phone received an MMS message, a completely unfamiliar number. I clicked on it. It was a photo. The background was downstairs in my apartment, under the dim streetlights, standing a man in a black hoodie. He raised his head, as if looking at my window, although I couldn't see the face clearly. But that figure, I was too familiar with it. It was brilliant. There is also a line under the photo. Dr. Show. The game has just begun. I hope you like the opening gift I gave you. Don't make the audience wait too long. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. This madman, he not only came out of the police station, but also found my house. He was spying on me. He knew everything. He knew the confrontation between me and Qin Yang, knew that I took over Lin Wei. He was not warning me, he was inviting me to join his game of revenge. And I, who had long been in the bureau, couldn't quit at all. I didn't sleep all night, and the sky outside the window went from pitch black, to fish belly white, to golden. I sat on the sofa, staring at the photo on my phone, and looked at it all night. Gao Ming is like a ghost, obviously there, but I can't catch him. This feeling is particularly uncomfortable. I am used to controlling everything, controlling my scalpel, controlling my patience, controlling my life. But now, there is a variable that I can't control at all, and even I have a hunch. I, Qin Yang, Lin Wei, and Lin Donghai, all of us, have become the puppets of Gao Ming's revenge drama, and he is the only director hiding behind the scenes. The phone rang again, breaking the silence of the early morning. This time the caller ID was father. I chuckled in my heart. So early. How could my father call me? I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Hey, Dad. On the other end of the phone, my father's voice was still as calm as ever, but with a little tiredness. Jingjing. You come to my study right now. His tone was an unquestionable order. I didn't ask much. I simply washed up, changed my clothes, and drove to my parents' house. And I was up and down along the way. My father is the old president of Ruihua Hospital, although he has taken a back seat. But in the hospital, and even the entire medical community, he has a pivotal position. He is upright, cherishes feathers the most, and values reputation the most. I was at the airport yesterday, in front of so many media to poke things out, although it occupies the moral high ground. But it undoubtedly pushes Ruihua Hospital to the forefront. My father must be looking for me for this matter. Sure enough, as soon as I walked into the study, I saw my father sitting behind the mahogany desk. His face was very gloomy, and on the coffee table in front of him, there were several copies of today's morning newspaper, and the front page headlines of each one were about me. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, the Angel in White staged a life and death rescue. The most beautiful Dr. Zhou Jing, uncovering a huge loophole in medical supervision. A wealthy pregnant woman is in danger in the air, and there are many doubts behind it. My father didn't look at me, just tapped his finger on the table. Tell me, what the hell is going on? His voice was very calm, but I knew that this was the calm before the storm. I didn't hide it. I told him the ins and outs of the matter, except for those dirtiest deals and conspiracies. Of course, I hid Qin Yang's role, only saying that it was a follow-up caused by an ordinary dispute over occupying a seat. My father listened quietly, and when I finished speaking, he raised his head to look at me. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle. Jingjing, tell me the truth. Is this matter related to Qin Yang? I was shocked. My father was indeed an old fox. And he continued, don't forget, Qin Yang was brought out by me. What kind of person he is, I know better than you. He can't afford to be early. It's his biggest feature. Such a big mess. He will let you carry it alone. My father's words left me speechless. He sighed again, his tone full of helplessness. Late last night, Lin Donghai called me personally. He was very angry. The consequences were very serious. He asked me to tell you to stop here. Don't pursue it anymore. Otherwise he will use all means to make you unable to stay in Ruehua, and even the entire medical industry. I clenched my fists. Lin Donghai was threatening me. My father added. He also said that as long as you are willing to stop and personally come forward to clarify to the media, everything before is just a misunderstanding. He will not only drop all the charges against you, but also let Qin Yang immediately sit in the position of vice president, and transfer you to the headquarters of Ruehua Group as the medical director, which is the compensation he gives you. My father looked at me. His eyes were very complicated. Jingjing, I know you are wronged, but I can't bend my arm or thigh. We can't afford to mess with people like Lin Donghai. Stop it, for your future, and for Qin Yang's future. I looked at my father, at the gray hair at his sideburns, and the plea in his eyes, and suddenly felt extremely sad. My father, the old dean who once taught me to be benevolent as a doctor and stick to the bottom line, was finally smoothed out by this real world, and he wanted me to compromise, hoping that I would sacrifice my principles for the so-called overall situation. I stood up and bowed deeply to him. I'm sorry, Dad. I can't listen to you about this. Once some bottom lines are withdrawn, I will never come back. I straightened up, looked at his shocked eyes, and continued. Not only will I not stop, but I will also take over Lin Weiss operation myself. And just this morning, I want everyone to see whether I, Zhou Jing, am saving people or killing people. After saying that, I didn't stop staying, and resolutely walked out of the study, and there was my father's angry roar behind me, and the sound of the teacup breaking. I knew that I had broken his heart and cut off all my retreats. From today onwards, I would fight alone, no one to rely on, and no one to stop me. I drove straight to the downtown hospital. The hustle and bustle of the city outside the car window was isolated, and I was the only one in the car who was so calm that my heartbeat was terrible. I knew that I was about to face a war without gunpowder. The battlefield was the operating room. The enemy was Qin Yang, Lin Donghai, the power of the entire Ruehua group, and even my father's disappointed eyes. When I appeared on the obstetrics and gynecology floor in a white coat, I could clearly feel that there was a strange atmosphere in the air. And the colleagues who greeted me warmly on weekdays were all like avoiding the plague, hurriedly walking by with their heads down. Their eyes were complex and difficult to understand. There was sympathy, fear, and schadenfreude. I, Zhou Jing, the youngest deputy chief physician of Ruehua Hospital and a rising star in the industry, became a huge trouble that everyone could avoid overnight. The door of the dean's office was closed, but I knew that it must be full of people. And those college leaders who praised me on weekdays were racking their brains at the moment, thinking about how to throw my hot potato out. Sure enough, as soon as I walked to the door of the intensive care unit, I was stopped by the head nurse, Director Zhou. Her expression was very embarrassed. The hospital temporarily set up an expert consultation team, led by Vice President Li, to fully take over Ms. Lin Weiss follow-up treatment. So today's surgery, you don't need your main surgery. Here, they still use the most direct and shameless method after all, using administrative power to forcibly deprive me of my qualifications as an attending doctor. Is it? I looked at her without any expression on my face. Vice President Li, the surgical expert who can't even figure out which 3 words PNH is an abbreviation. Let him preside over a fetal preservation surgery for a high-risk mother. My voice was not loud, but it was like an ice pick, stabbing the head nurse's face to turn white. This is the decision of the hospital, she said with difficulty. Can the hospital's decision disregard the safety of the patient's life? I took a step forward, domineering. Lin Wei is my patient. From the plane, to the ambulance, to this hospital, all her situations, only I know best. Temporary change of coach. Any problems on the operating table? Who will bear this responsibility? Is it you, or Vice President Li, or Lin Donghai hiding behind his back to give orders? The head nurse was speechless when I asked her, and she broke out in a cold sweat. At this moment, a familiar figure walked over from the other end of the corridor. It was Qin Yang. He was still wearing a straight white coat, wearing gold wire glasses, looking elegant. He walked up to me, with the kind of disgusting and hypocritical concern on his face. Jingjing, don't embarrass Nurse Wang. It's all for your own good. You were so frightened yesterday, and you ran around all night. Your mental state is unstable, and the hospital is also worried about you. So you decided to let the more experienced Vice President Li take over. Don't worry. I will be outside the operating room throughout the whole process to ensure that nothing happens to Lin Wei. His words were flawless, which not only reflected the humanistic care of the hospital, but also implied that my emotional problems were not suitable for the main knife. And a good move to kill people without blood. My mental state is very good. I looked at him coldly. So good that I can clearly remember how you offered me that dirty deal last night. Chen Yang's pupils shrank suddenly, but he quickly regained his composure. Jingjing, you are too tired. You started talking nonsense. What's the matter? Let's go home after the operation is over. He wants to settle the matter, but I don't do as he wants. No need. I took out my mobile phone from my pocket and clicked on a recording, which was the conversation between me and Lin Wei that I recorded in the ward yesterday. Although only Lin Weiss last incomparably clear shaking of her head, but it was enough. Director Chin, I think everyone present wants to hear. Ms. Lin Wei, What does Ms. Lin Wei say about the father of the fetus in her womb? Chen Yang's face instantly turned pale. He stared at the mobile phone in my hand. His eyes were undisguised with murderous intent, and the air around him seemed to be frozen. At this tense moment, Sister Lee walked quickly from the elevator entrance. She held a document in her hand, while squeezing through the crowd and saying, "Let go, let go." After walking to me, she slapped the document on the head nurse's desk. Everyone's eyes were focused on the past. It was a legally valid medical power of attorney witnessed by a lawyer. The power of attorney had Lin Wei's signature and handprint, and the content was only one sentence. I, Lin Wei, voluntarily put all the diagnosis and treatment matters of myself and the fetus in my womb, the only entrusted to Dr. Zhou Jing of Ruihua Hospital, except for Dr. Zhou Jing. I refuse any other doctor to carry out any form of invasive treatment on me, including but not limited to surgery, puncture, etc. If the hospital forces to change the chief surgeon, all consequences caused by the hospital will be borne by the hospital and the relevant responsible persons, and the hospital and the relevant responsible persons shall bear full legal responsibility. This is what I asked Sister Lee to do overnight last night. I had expected them to use this trick. And this power of attorney is my trump card. Chen Yang looked at the power of attorney. His body shook slightly. He almost stood unsteadily. He lost. He was defeated. And in the face of the law and the patient's wishes, any administrative order was pale and powerless. I picked up the power of attorney and shook it in front of his eyes. Now, do I still want to avoid it? Director Chin. I ignored his ugly face like a dead man, turned and pushed open the heavy door to the operating room, behind which was deathly silence, knowing that from the moment I stepped through this door, I would be alone and walk towards the bottomless eye of the storm. The shadowless light was dazzling, illuminating everything on the operating table, and also illuminated everyone's face in the operating room. And the air was filled with the smell of disinfectant, cold and killing. My surgical team was personally selected by me, and the assistants, instrument nurses, and itinerant nurses were all the most trustworthy old people who had worked with me for many years. But I knew that there must have been a nail planted by Chen Yang mixed in. I looked around, and finally set my sights on the anesthesiologist Zhang Wei. His business ability is acceptable, but he likes to follow the trend the most on weekdays. I remember last week, he also went to ask Chen Yang for a place in a scientific research project. He saw my gaze. His eyes were a little dodging, and he pushed his glasses unnaturally. It was him. I sneered in my heart, but my face was calm. Get ready to start. I stretched out my hands, and the instrument nurse skillfully put on sterile gloves for me. The vital signs are stable. Zhang Wei's voice came from behind me. I picked up the scalpel and gently slashed the first knife on Lin Wei's lower abdomen, moving steadily like a rock. The process of the operation was extremely difficult. Lin Wei's PNHB 27 physique made her blood like a disobedient child, and she would rush out at the slightest carelessness, and every movement I made had to be accurate to the millimeter. Every cut, every stitch, like dancing on the tip of a knife. The operating room was so quiet that only the regular dripping sound of the monitor and the crisp sound of colliding with the instruments made everyone's nerves stretch into a thread. Time passed minute by minute. An hour, 2 hours, and the operation had reached the most critical stage of uterine repair. And at this moment, Director Zhou, anesthesiologist Zhang Wei's voice suddenly became urgent. The patient's blood pressure plummeted. Heart rate abnormalities. It may be shock caused by heavy bleeding. The operation must be completed immediately. It is recommended to remove the uterus immediately and protect you. His words were like a bomb, exploding in the quiet operating room, and the faces of the assistants and nurses showed nervous looks. And the removal of the uterus meant that the child could not be saved. This was Chen Yang's backhand. He wanted to borrow a knife to kill people, borrow my hand to get rid of the child, and then put all the blame on the head of the medical accident. I didn't look up. I didn't even go to the monitor. My eyes were still focused on the surgical field of vision. Shut up. I spat out 2 words coldly. I see clearly. The bleeding point has been completely controlled by me, and the blood pressure has dropped because the dose of anesthetic drugs you injected exceeded the conventional standard by 20. Do you want her to die on the operating table? My voice was not loud, but it was like a heavy hammer, slamming hard into Zhang Wei's heart. He trembled all over, and his face turned pale instantly. I didn't. He wanted to quibble. No. I put down the needle holder in my hand, raised my head for the first time, and looked at him coldly through the mask. Then let me ask you, why is the patient's central venous pressure and blood oxygen saturation normal? Are you, an anesthesiologist who has been in the industry for more than 10 years, unable to distinguish between the most basic drug-induced hypotension and hemorrhagic shock? Or do you have an eye problem today? Or is it a brain problem? My series of rhetorical questions left him speechless. Cold sweat soaked his back, and everyone's eyes in the operating room changed, and they looked at Zhang Wei as if they were looking at a sinner. Immediately adjust the dosage of the drug and pull my blood pressure back. I lowered my head again and picked up the instruments. If you can't do it within 3 minutes, you can get me out of this operating room, and I will personally apply to the medical committee to revoke your medical license. My words are the final judgment. Zhang Wei didn't dare to make any small moves, and began to adjust the medication in a hurry. And soon, the numbers on the monitor returned to normal, and his silent confrontation ended in my complete victory. The next operation went incredibly smoothly. No one dared to challenge my authority anymore, and when I finished the last stitch and cut the sutures, I exhaled softly. The operation was successful, and the mother and child are safe. There was a depressing and relieved cheer in the operating room. I took off my bloodstained surgical gown and walked out of the operating room. My body felt like it had been hollowed out, exhausted to the extreme, but my spirit was more excited than ever. In the corridor, Chen Yang was waiting anxiously, and when he saw me coming out, he immediately greeted me. Jing, how is it? The patient. He tried hard to squeeze a trace of concern out of his face, but I saw the deep disappointment and resentment that could not be concealed from the bottom of his eyes. I walked up to him, stopped. Don't worry. I looked into his eyes and said word by word, I helped you save your trouble. Anne, very healthy. You should thank me. After saying that, I passed him and left him alone, frozen in place, with an expression on his handsome face that was uglier than dead. Back in my office, it was already late at night. I threw myself into the chair. I didn't even want to move a finger again. The physical exhaustion was far less than the mental exhaustion. Today's surgery was like a war. My enemy, not only the disease, but also the human heart. I opened the drawer and took out a transparent evidence bag from it. Inside was an infusion tube, which I quietly brought out of the operating room. At the interface of the infusion tube, there was a small pinhole that was almost imperceptible to the naked eye. I was sure that it was not a trace left by conventional operations. Someone tried to inject an unknown drug into Lin Weiss' body through a vein during the operation. If it weren't for my high concentration throughout the whole process, I noticed the abnormality of anesthesiologist Zhang Wei, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Chen Yang. Not only did he want the child to die, he even wanted to get rid of Lin Wei together. This man was completely crazy. I rubbed my aching temples and felt a wave of weakness. I blocked an open gun, but I couldn't prevent the next hidden arrow. I needed evidence. Ironclad evidence that I could kill him in one blow. At this moment, my private phone made a slight vibration, another unfamiliar number, and another MMS message, and my heart suddenly lifted. It was smart. I clicked on the MMS. This time it was no longer a photo, but a 5-minute video. The picture of the video was a little shaky, and the angle was also very tricky, as if it was secretly taken with a miniature camera, but the content of the picture made me instantly feel cold all over my body. And the place where the video was filmed was the operating room where I fought for a full 8 hours today. In the picture, I was wearing a surgical gown, bowing my head and concentrating on the operation, but the focus of the camera was on the anesthesiologist Zhang Wei behind me, and the video clearly recorded his actions to secretly increase the anesthetic dose, recording his panicked and vicious eyes when he looked at the monitor, and even recorded that in the second half of the operation, while everyone's attention was in my hands, he quietly took out a miniature syringe from his pocket and tried to pierce Lin Weiss' intravenous infusion tube, although he finally gave up because of timidity. This action has been completely filmed, which is ironclad evidence that Chen Yang bought murder. My hands began to tremble. Who is this brilliant person? How did he put his eyes in a heavy guarded operating room? How many nets did he lay by my side? At the end of the video, the picture went black, and a few lines of blood-red words popped up on the screen. A wonderful one-man show. Doctor. Show. Unfortunately, your stage is full of termites. I will help you clean up the portal. No thanks. Now, in the name of a loyal audience, I send you a formal invitation. The next scene of the good show is about to begin. Location: Full Moon Hotel. Presidential suite on the top floor. Time: 10 o'clock sharp tonight. Come alone. Your future fate depends on your choice tonight. I looked at the phone screen, only to feel a cold air rushing from the tail vertebrae all the way to the heavenly spirit cover. He was not inviting me. He was having a showdown with me. He knew everything. Knew Chen Yang's conspiracy. Knew my counterattack. He was like a god with a script in his hand, coldly staring at us self-righteous chess pieces, dying on the chessboard. To go or not to go. Reason told me that this was a trap, a fatal trap set by a madman, but I had no choice. Chen Yang and Lin Donghai had driven me to a dead end. Gao Ming, this devil from the abyss, was the only straw I could grasp now, even if this straw was quenched with poison. I glanced at the clock on the wall, and at 1 o'clock at 9, I stood up, took off my white coat, changed into my clothes, and then sent a text message to Sisterly. Sisterly, start plan B. If I don't contact you again at 12 o'clock in the middle of the night, I will anonymously send the information I handed over to you to the Discipline Inspection Commission and Lin Donghai's opponent company. After doing all this, I picked up the car keys and walked out of the office, and it rained heavily outside the window at some point, and I drove the car, merging into the traffic flow of the city, like a lonely boat sailing to the dark deep sea without hesitation. What I will see tonight is not a person, but my fate. Full Moon Hotel. On the top of the city, the presidential suite on the top floor was as quiet as an island suspended in the clouds, and I pushed open the heavy carved wooden door, which was unlocked. The room was not as eerie and oppressive as I imagined, and outside the huge floor-to-ceiling windows was a brilliant night view of the whole city, with soft carpets, warm lights, and a faint, expensive cigar smell in the air. A man stood by the window with his back to me, wearing a black silk dressing gown made of particularly good material. tall and straight, holding a glass of red wine in his hand, swaying gently. He is completely different from the crazy man in a hoodie hiding in a corner in my impression, but he is like a big man who can control the lifeblood of the city. You're here, he spoke, his voice low and magnetic, and then slowly turned around a handsome face I had never seen before, with deep facial features, sharp edges, and eyes like two bottomless ancient wells, quiet, but able to suck away people's souls. He is very young, 35 years old at most, but the precipitated aura on his body is much more mature than his age. Who are you? I clutched the bag in my hand, with a voice recorder and a small siren in it, and my heart was always hanging. You can call me smart. He smiled, raised his glass and gestured to me. You can also call me the master of this game. Chen Yang, Lin Wei, Lin Donghai, and even you, Dr. Shou, are all guests at my table, and I am the only dealer, he said so calmly that it made me panic. Did you shoot that video? I asked him. It's just an appetizer that isn't worth mentioning. He walked to the wine cabinet, poured me a glass of the same red wine, and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. Sit down, Dr. Shou. We have a whole night to talk about how you should go in the future. I didn't sit down, but still stood there and confronted him. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Is it for revenge? For your parents? He picked up his glass and took a sip, saying, the word revenge is too heavy. I prefer to call it liquidation of a blood debt that has been hidden for 20 years. Lin Donghai stepped on the bones of my parents and sat in the position of director of Ruehua Group. He thought that time could smooth everything out. He was wrong. Every minute and every second of my life is to remind him that some debts have to be paid off in a lifetime, or even several generations. His tone was very calm, as if he was talking about someone else's business, but under that calmness, there was a monstrous hatred that could burn everything down. So, Lin Wei and that child are just your pawns. It's a weapon. He corrected me. The most perfect weapon that can bring down the Lin business empire from within. Lin Donghai has been competitive all his life, and he values face and family inheritance the most. I just want him to raise his enemy's grandson with his own hands. Let him watch this child grow up day by day, and let him live in regret and fear every day. I want this child to be the sweetest and most vicious curse in his later years. I listened to his words, chills all over. This man is not a madman. He is the devil, a vengeful devil who has fed himself with hatred for 20 years. What about you? I asked him. What role do you play in this game? A stalker who is abandoned by yourself and goes crazy. He smiled. That's just a code I tailor-made for Lin Wei, Chen Yang, and everyone. A code that can make them relax their vigilance and believe in me completely. As for my true identity, he picked up a document from the sofa and threw it at me. I took it and opened it, and my eyes suddenly widened. It was an equity transfer agreement, which was clearly written that Marriott Capital, the second largest shareholder of Ruehua Group, transferred all 15 of its shares to Gao Ming, and the agreement took effect today. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. When did he have so much money? Surprised. He seemed to be very satisfied with my reaction. Lin Donghai has more than one opponent, and I am not the only one who wants to see him fall. Over the years, I have been helping them do things that are inconvenient for them to come forward, but they have to do. In return, they gave me the first chip I could flip the table. For example, Vice President Wang of Ruehua Group, the lawyer who released me was arranged by him, and the camera in the operating room was also installed by his people. He unveiled a huge shady scene to me that I had never thought of. This is not a simple personal revenge at all, but a capital strangulation that has been planned for a long time. Lin Donghai is obviously in the bureau, but he doesn't know it at all. Now, you get the idea. He walked up to me and looked at me condescendingly. I don't need you to be my pawn. I need you to be my ally. You are responsible for bringing my children into this world safely, and you are responsible for using your professionalism and reputation to make all the scandals of the Lin family and Qinyang public. And I'm responsible for clearing all the obstacles and making you the only winner after this storm. Qinyang will be ruined. Lin Donghai will be ruined. And you, Shou Jing. He stretched out his hand and gently lifted my chin, his eyes hot as if he were about to melt me. You will get everything you want: freedom, dignity, and a new future. Now, tell me about your options. I didn't answer him right away. I looked at his eyes quietly, and after a long time, I gently pushed his hand away and said word by word, I never make a deal with the devil, but I can talk to my allies about cooperation. Gao Ming had an expected smile on his face. I know that you are different from those fools. He turned around and took out a black USB flash drive from the dark compartment of the wine cabinet. This is all the evidence that Qinyang has used his position over the years to collect kickbacks for medical devices and resell hospital-controlled drugs, as well as all the records of him and Lin Donghai's daughter Lin Wei, as well as Lin Donghai's opponents to engage in the transfer of benefits, which is enough for him to stay in prison for a lifetime. He put the USB flash drive in the palm of my hand, and the thing looked very light, but it was as heavy as 1,000 pounds in his hand. As for Lin Donghai, Gao Ming sneered. His biggest dead hole is not me, nor you, but himself. His ship has long been hollowed out, and if you light that lead at the most opportune time, it will collapse on its own. I clenched the USB flash drive in my hand, didn't say another word, turned around and left the presidential suite. I didn't go home. I didn't go to the hospital. I drove straight to my dad's study. When I plugged the USB flash drive into my dad's computer and put the shocking accounts and videos in front of him, my dad's face changed from shock to anger. And finally his heart became ashen. He cherished his reputation all his life and had a breeze in his sleeves. But he didn't expect that his most important student and most trusted son-in-law turned out to be a big moth burrowing into the heart of Ruihua Hospital. Dad. I looked at his face that seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. Do you still think I should stop? My dad didn't speak, just closed his eyes and waved his hand tiredly. I know. He acquiesced. The next day was the annual board meeting of Ruihua Hospital, and the conference room was full of directors of the group and senior management of the hospital. Chen Yang sat on his left hand, with a proud face in the spring breeze. He looked at me, his eyes full of contempt and ridicule of the winner. He thought I had compromised. Thought he had won. Just as Lin Donghai cleared his throat and was about to speak, the heavy door of the conference room was pushed open, and I walked in, and everyone's eyes were focused on me. Some were surprised, some were puzzled, and some were waiting to watch a good show. Zhou Jing. Lin Donghai frowned, looking unhappy. This is the board of directors. Who let you in? Me. A calm voice came from behind me. It was my dad. He wore an old dean's suit that he hadn't worn for a long time. Walked to me step by step, holding a document in his hand. As the honorary president of Ruihua Hospital for life, I reported to the board of directors in my real name. Chen Yang, the administrative director, is suspected of embezzlement of a huge amount of position and illegal resale of illegal drugs. And the evidence is here. He threw the printed document into the center of the conference table, and the audience suddenly became quiet, and even the needle fell to the ground and could be heard. Chen Yang's face turned pale instantly. He stood up suddenly, pointed at me and my dad and shouted, You are spitting blood. This is slander. Whether it's slander or not, the comrades of the Commission for Discipline Inspection will give you justice. My dad looked at him coldly, his eyes as if he were looking at a dead man. At this moment, the door of the conference room was pushed open again, and several men in uniform and with serious expressions walked in and walked straight to Chen Yang. Chen Yang, you are suspected of multiple job-related crimes. Please go back with us for investigation. The cold handcuffs handcuffed Chen Yang's hands, which had taken countless red envelopes and kickbacks, and he suddenly became paralyzed and dragged out like a puddle of mud. Lin Donghai sat on the main seat. His face was so gloomy that he could drip water. He looked at me. His eyes were full of undisguised killing intent. He knew that I was declaring war on him. Okay, it's very good. He slowly clapped his hands. Dean Zhou, Dr. Zhou, it's really a good show of righteousness and extermination of relatives. It's a pity that pulling out a Chen Yang can't move the foundation of my Lin Donghai at all, and we are not done with this matter. He stood up and was ready to go. Lin Dong, please stay. I opened my mouth to stop him. Your show is not over yet. I still have a gift for you here. I took out my phone and clicked on a video. It was the second gift Gao Ming sent me that I in the video. Lin Wei is lying on the hospital bed, complaining weakly, crying and saying how Chen Yang induced her and deceived her step by step, making her believe that she could get rid of Gao Ming with an accidental miscarriage. At the end of the video, Lin Wei looked at the camera and asked with tears in her eyes, Dad, he wants to kill me. He wants to kill your grandson. Why do you want to help him? In the conference room, on the huge projection screen, Lin Wei's crying face full of despair clearly appeared in front of everyone. Lin Donghai's body shook suddenly. He pointed to the screen. His lips trembled, and he couldn't say a word. Now, I looked around at every director present. Do you still think that this is just a personal grudge between me and Chen Yang? This is a deliberate murder, and the accomplice is Chairman Lin Donghai, who just wants to save his face and sacrifices the lives of his daughter and grandson. My words were like the last straw, completely crushing Lin Donghai's nerves. His eyes darkened, his head tilted, and he fell straight. A stroke that came suddenly, but it was reasonable, and his judgment day had arrived. Lin Donghai fell, like knocking down the first domino, and the entire Ruihua group fell into unprecedented chaos. He was paralyzed by a stroke and could no longer manage the company, and those shareholders who had long been dissatisfied with him began to frantically grab territory. With the support of Gao Ming, Vice President Wang quickly rose and became the new leader of the group, and a tragic infighting began. Ruihua Group's stock price fell again, and the once glorious business empire fell apart in just 1 month. This is a clever revenge, a perfect revenge that does not require bloodshed, but can kill the heart. He won completely. Chen Yang was sentenced to 20 years in prison in the face of conclusive evidence, and in this life, he could only repent of his greed and desire in prison. Lin Wei recovered smoothly under my treatment and gave birth to a healthy boy. After Lin Donghai's downfall, she inherited the remaining little property of the Lin family, although not much, but it was enough for her and her children to live a stable life. She left the city with her children and went to a place where no one knew them and started her life again. Before leaving, she sent me a text message with 2 words. Thank you. I didn't reply. We don't owe each other. And I, after dealing with everything, submitted my resignation letter to the hospital. I was tired of the intrigues here, and I saw through the compromise and helplessness of my dad's generation. He didn't stop me anymore. But when I left home, he said, Jingjing, You did the right thing. I used all my savings to open my own small obstetrics and gynecology clinic in a quiet seaside town. No more endless surgeries and meetings. No longer having to look at other people's faces, guess other people's minds. Welcome a new life every day. Look at happy smiling faces. My heart has never been so calm and so peaceful. As for Gao Ming, after Lin Donghai fell, he was like evaporating from the world and never appeared again. I didn't ask about him. We are allies, but we can never be friends. Our world is different. All I know is that he sent someone to anonymously donate a large sum of money to my clinic. Enough for me to expand this small clinic into a small hospital. I didn't refuse. Just think of it as his thank you to me. One sunny afternoon, I was sitting in the courtyard of the clinic drinking coffee, looking at the blue sea in the distance. Sisterly called, chatted with me about homely things, and suddenly asked me, Jingjing, do you regret it? For a seat. He caused such a big turmoil and completely reshuffled his life. I smiled and looked up at the sky, where a plane flew overhead, leaving a white trail and flying into the unknown distance. I don't regret it. I said, that's the most valuable one. 800 yuan I have spent in my life. That one. 800 yuan is not a seat, not an upgrade, not a well-designed lesson. It buys my principles, my bottom line, my dignity, and the freedom I finally get that no one can take away.